I think one of the reasons why panpsychism has surged lately is because of a particular theory, the integrated information theory. So this is a theory that says if you have information in a system and the information is of the bits of information relate to each other in a specific way according to a very complicated formula and math that is at this point not fully understood, uh, uh, then it produces the feeling of consciousness. And to my mind, it belongs to this general category of magic because let's say it does produce the feeling. You still have not explained how the feeling then makes us, affects our speech machinery so that we say we have it, right? Actually doesn't explain the only objective phenomena that we know about it, which is that people, it affects our thought. We claim to have consciousness. We say we have consciousness. We have these beliefs about ourselves. So whatever it is, it's affecting our speech machinery. But if you have a theory that says a magic essence emerges, you haven't explained how the magic essence then comes back again and tweaks the individual neurons to make the thoughts and the speech. Anyway, so here's IIT, Integrated Information Theory. And what it says basically is anything with information in it has at least a little teeny bit of the consciousness stuff. And as the information gets more complex and more integrated, the consciousness stuff gets bigger and bigger. And so many people who subscribe to that theory, like I said, I don't think it's really a theory, so to speak. It's a guess. But the logical conclusion of that theory is therefore everything has at least some degree of consciousness. And as that is swept through and people have sort of thought, glommed onto that, I think people there's a very strong desire to maintain a sense of magic, mystery, and non-physicality to the universe. In a world where science is threatening a lot of that, what people hold dear. And so IIT has become kind of a bandwagon for that. And people jump on it and like, yes, this is, and it's mathematical too. And it's like physics. And so it must be right. And then this expands and expands. And then people start to think about it deeply and realize, oh, that must mean panpsychism. Because now, electrons and potatoes and planets, they all have some information in them. And I think that's partly why, maybe the main reason for that big resurgence in panpsychism right now.
Yeah, the threshold thing in IIT seems really difficult to get your mind around. Like, just the idea that at some level of complexity, really it's not even complexity, like the math is difficult to understand, but at some level, something is more integrated and therefore more conscious or less conscious, and then that somehow has relevance for attention mechanisms and things that we do have a good understanding of. So it gets a bit confusing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, confusing is one way of putting it. I'm obviously not a fan of that theory, but I don't mean to isolate that one theory, but I think it belongs to a general category. Maybe some of the flaws become more obvious in that theory because it tries to be as systematic as possible. And so you start to see where the flaws lie. But almost every theory of consciousness that has been posed to date is still essentially a magical theory, because it essentially says, here's a condition. When that condition is met, then a fundamentally non-physical essence, a feeling, emerges. And as soon as you say that, you're stuck. As soon as you say that, you're stuck. There's no theory anymore.
Yeah, because it doesn't explain anything.
That's right.
It seems like the only valid strategy is to give a theory that shows why we might pose the question, but we might be fooling ourselves into thinking it.
That's right. So, yes. So that's one reason. That's one reason for thinking that essentially we're, as you say, fooling ourselves into it. But the other reason is simply that I think this is very hard for people to grasp. The reason why people are so certain they have consciousness is not because they have consciousness. It's because they have information in their brains telling their higher cognition that they have this thing. And that's logically necessarily true. It's true of everything we think we know. Like the reason why I think there's a computer in front of me is actually not strictly because there is a computer in front of me. It's because my brain has information in it telling me that it's there. Like that's the actual reason. There's information in the brain telling you that you have this thing. That's why we say we have consciousness. That's why we say anything at all. And well, once you grasp that, then the rest is a little easier to follow.
Right, and it's great because you don't seem to be an eliminativist about it either. And I know eliminativism is also a complex set of views, but you're not saying that the feeling doesn't exist. You're just saying that it's a different mechanism that what we might intuitively grasp, and it's socially pervasive and has value. It does exist.
Right. So there's value to it. There is a real thing that exists. And then there's a model of the real thing that the brain constructs. And the model is not quite the same as the real thing. And then there's what we think we have, which is based on the model. And the model is the reflection of the real thing. And so there's like this step-by-step, like the whisper game where, one person whispers and the next person hears it and passes it on. And by the time it comes out the other end, it's a bit different. I think that's what's going on, that we have something real, the ability of the brain to focus its resources and deeply process something. That's what we have. That's real. It's mechanistic. It's describable. Then we have the brain's model or description of that. And that model is not perfectly detailed or accurate, and it's a little fuzzy at the edges and schematic. And then we have our cognition accessing that model and coming up with an even more schematized version of it. And then we have the report that we talk about. And when that comes out the other end, we're saying, I have this essentially magical feeling, and I can't figure out how a magical feeling can be explained scientifically. But if you understand that step-by-step process of how you start with something real, it's not like there's nothing there. You're right. It's not eliminativist. There's a real thing there. But then there's these sort of stepwise sequence of processing through the brain that then leads us to believe we have something that's similar to, but a little bit magicalized and fictionalized compared to the real thing that we have.
Right, and you do write about how socially pervasive it is in our everyday colloquial folk understanding of the world, the idea of the plasma and all that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's right. So that's another point of interest for me, is that it's really easy. I think it's really easy to look at some of these widespread cultural beliefs and scoff at them, and but actually, I think they have an origin that is actually meaningful. And so, just to give a really, really specific example, one of the things that we studied was this I beams, the belief in, it's very pervasive that people believe in or feel like there's beams coming out of the eyes, and that's been in culture as far back as people have been writing about anything. So the ancient Greeks talked about it, and so on and so on. And even in modern culture, it's embedded in Superman had X-rays that come out of his eyes, and we all feel like we can sense someone's gaze on the back of our neck and all this sort of stuff. So we feel like there's power coming out of the eyes. And what we realized in our experiments is that even people who don't believe that, who are like, that's garbage, that's like, I'm scientific, I don't believe in eye beams, and that's true. There are no actual things coming out of the eye. But when you look at another person looking at something, when you see, John looking at a thing, at a ball, you cannot help encoding John's attentive gaze, his attention, as though it were an invisible thing streaming out of his eyes toward that ball. Like the brain automatically builds that model for you. And we think it does that because it's quick, it's easy. It's like drawing an arrow to help keep track of what people around you are thinking and doing. So it's part of social cognition. And you see those signals in the brain. You see them in visual areas that light up in specific ways at a very subtle level, so that we don't see it. It's not vivid enough for us to see it, but we kind of get the feely impression of something streaming out of the eyes. And everyone has this, whether you're aware of it or not. Everyone has this a tendency to attribute these incorrect models to other people to better keep track in a simple way of what they're thinking and what they're about to do.